In this bonus episode of Silent Podcast, we explore the coronavirus pandemic 1 year later with Dr. Lynn Mendonța, sickle cell advocate and physician living with sickle cell disease. Despite her sickle cell status, Dr. Lynn treats the sickest of the sick ICU patients, including those with COVID-19.
I was just like, oh my God, this is like, what have I done? Like, what have I done? What are you doing, Lynn? Take care of yourself. You don't have to do this. There are other things you could do in life. But I wanted to be a doctor for forever. I specifically wanted to be an anesthesiologist since high school, and I wanted to be a critical care physician since early medical school.
Welcome to the Silent Podcast, where our focus is to strike out the silenced voices of those affected by sickle cell disease. We believe that by creating a platform to talk about real-life situations through the lens of sickle cell, we can change the stigma one voice at a time. Each episode, we will feature individuals who are changing the narrative of sickle cell. We hope that by sharing these stories, this podcast will inspire not only those living with the disease, but anybody that's listening to boldly persevere, confidently speak their truth, and courageously follow their dreams. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Silent Podcast. I'm Christina and
And I'm Ijeoma.
And we have a bonus episode for you today. It is currently, as we're recording, it's March 6th. And when this podcast comes out, it will be mid-March. And mid-March 2020 was quite a different time. And so in this podcast, we're going to reflect on COVID-19, its impacts, and we have such a special guest to share with you today.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. Just even when Dr. Lynn reached out to me, expressing her interest in being on the podcast and sharing a little bit about her story, I was excited for us to get to this day, for us to talk to her, and it was definitely well worth the wait. Just the fact that she is a sickle cell advocate, living with sickle cell, and a doctor in ICU during COVID time.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, there's just so much to unpack with this episode. It kind of brings me to our voice of truth for today. In the midst of chaos, there's always opportunity. And so just like you said, us reflecting on COVID and everything that's happened, it was a year of chaos, right? For some, but then there was so much opportunity that presented itself during this time. And a lot of that came out in our conversation. So I'm truly excited to hear for y'all to hear what she shared and parts of our conversation.
And speaking of opportunity, I have a question for you as we're just thinking about, it being a year since our COVID-19 quarantine, where we thought we'd only be inside for a couple of weeks or a month at most. And here we are a year later, some of us still, not in public spaces. What has been your glimmer? What has been the opportunity, your glimmer of light throughout this year?
I would say we started the podcast, right? This past year. So I would say being able to share and advocate for sickle cell within this moment, right? And so being able to be that voice, as we said, we wanted to be in the silence. And so it has been a year of reflection of types of different things going on. And so the fact that we were able to still be able to amplify our voice during this time, I felt that was a glimmer of light. So we may not have been able to have the Ruby Ball this past year, but we were still able to be very impactful in the lives of others. So I feel like that was something that's a glimmer in the mist. What about you?
My garden. For those of you who don't know, I used to just kill succulents in my house, and succulents are literally the easiest plant to take care of, because they require no water. And I went from being a succulent killer to someone who grew cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and okra and sweet potatoes, and the list goes on. And it taught me, it was like a nice reprieve to just go outside in the middle of sitting down in meetings. But it also taught me a lot about faith and how it works. Like you plant the seed and you hope that it grows, and then it does, and then it bears fruit. So
oh girl, look, okay, come on. Yes, Pastor Scott.
Don't do that.
What I used to tell you, missionary Scott. Oh yeah, I used to call her missionary Scott, y'all. But not because she was a missionary, because of a sweater that she used to like to wear that made her look like one. So that's another story.
Yes. But yeah, okay, so let's get into this podcast, because this was such a great conversation and we really want you all to listen in. I'm so impressed with Dr. Lynn, and I know that she's going to be a force that you are going to hear from again, for sure.
Oh, definitely. So yeah, let's get into it.
And here's a quick message from our sponsor. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are here with Dr. Lynn Mendonża, who is a critical care fellow in St. Louis who has sickle cell anemia and treats the sickest of the sick patients in the ICU, including patients with COVID-19. She's originally from Houston, Texas, and she received her MD from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and completed her anesthesiology residency at University of Pennsylvania. Her career interests focus on patient safety, quality improvement, and diversity and equity in medicine. Welcome, 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 Dr. Lynn. We are so happy to have you here.
Impressive bio.
I know, then I just overcheers.
Yeah. But no, thank you so much, Dr. Lynn, for taking the time to come on this podcast. We truly appreciate you, and just can't wait to hear your story. The fact that you are a sickle cell advocate, sickle cell patient that's working in the medical community. We appreciate what you're doing to give back. So we just wanted to put that out there to begin with. As we get started, I just wanted to know, how would you describe your sickle cell journey in one word?
Confusion. I will delve into that. So I think I learned my sickle cell status in the most unusual way possible. So growing up in Houston, my mom, she was a nurse. She noticed when I was little that I'd always have pain in my knees. And I think she always suspected that I had sickle cell. But whenever we went to the doctor, they'd be like, no, she doesn't have sickle cell. She has sickle cell trait. Trait. And she got, at that point, she just got frustrated going to the doctor. And was just like, look, we'll just treat this on our own. So I would have crises as a kid where I'll have excruciating back pain, the knee pain, and my parents being my parents are Nigerian. They were born and raised in Nigeria and came to the US. So they didn't really know how to navigate the health system outside of just working in it. Since my mom was a nurse and my dad was a small business owner. So they were they wanted to treat things on their own. So it was a lot of Tylenol.
That's how my mom was. So I understand. My mom's she's a nurse, she's an RN. So I'd be at home. She'll try to get me situated at home. And I'm I get to the point where I feel like I should be at the hospital right now, because you can't take care of this pain anymore at the house. So I got used to her being okay, here's a heating pad. Let's soak in the tub. Here's some water. Here's some Gatorade. Exactly. And so she do all these things, and it's okay, it's a weekend, I'm still in pain. Can we? So I totally understand.
Yeah. So but I guess my crises weren't as when I was in high school learning about medicine, and college learning about medicine, and medical school learning about medicine. My crises never quite fit the extreme of I go to the emergency room. I never quite got to that point. I just drowned myself in Tylenol and heating blankets and all the home remedies. It wasn't until in med school when I was rotating on OB-GYN, and we were doing it was a very crazy day on the rotation, and I fainted, flat out fainted. And everyone thought it was hypoglycemia. I thought it was hypoglycemia. I thought like, oh, my blood sugar's low, I'm dehydrated, like this is nothing. But they were like, no, you need to go see, you know, someone. And so they sent me to go see my NP. Thank goodness they didn't send me to the emergency room because I didn't want to pay that emergency room bill as a student in debt. And so they sent me to see my nurse practitioner, and she drew my blood test, and she's like, you have a hemoglobin of 7. What is going on? She's like, oh, wow. Like for those who don't know on your podcast, you know, like, you know, normal hemoglobin in a man and a woman is like 13, 14, men 15, 16. So when she saw I was a hemoglobin of 7, she was just like, oh, you're chronically anemic. Like you need to take more iron. Da, da, da. So she gave me iron pills, and I got iron poisoning because I was not iron deficient. And so when I turned up to her again, like, okay, I have iron poisoning now. Like my kidneys are like not working now. She started then was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to a hematologist because this is now out of my wheelhouse. And then I met with my hematologist, and she broke the news to me like, you have sickle cell anemia. I was like,
how old were you when you found out?
I was 27. I was 27. So confusion. I was 27. I was like, how can I've been told my entire life by doctors that I have traits. So how is it that I have anemia? And so she started asking, like, you know, where'd you grow up? Where did you, what were, what were your symptoms like? And kind of what she came to the conclusion to was that since I was born in South Carolina in the 80s, and, you know, with the way this country is, people probably didn't test me as an infant because it wasn't a priority of a part of their public health initiative for African-American children. And then when I got to, you know, Texas, at Texas Children's, it sounded like it's unclear whether or not they had the correct testing equipment for that time in the 80s. At least that's how she kind of proposed it, because she had done research and like why apparently there are a lot of people like me who don't realize they have sickle cell until their 20s because they were born in the South.
I get exactly what you're saying, because I think that's what happened with T-Boz. I think she was older as well when she found out her sickle cell diagnosis. And then just even with me, I've always known that I had sickle cell, but like since I was a baby, but I didn't know what I had until I was an adult. Probably about like 3 or 4 years ago, I found out that I had sickle cell beta thalassemia. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's totally okay. So yeah, so I learned that I had sickle cell anemia when I was a 4th year medical student about to graduate from medical school.
Wow.
So then I go now to residency. I'm an anesthesia intern. And so when you're in your 1st year of anesthesia, you're not actually doing the whole putting people to sleep thing. You're learning how to just be a good doctor in general across different services. So I take care of patients who are on the medicine service. I take care of patients who are on the surgical service. And my medicine service rotation was so confusing because I was on the sickle cell unit. And it was I'd have days where I feel blessed and days where I feel so guilty because I know how bad this disease can be for some people.
Yeah.
I still remember like this one gentleman who like couldn't have been like maybe a year or 2 older than me, who every day of his life he's always in chronic pain and has been in and out of the hospital and has been poked 1,000 times and how he just hates going through the emergency room and how people treat him in the emergency room, and then he gets over to as an inpatient. And so when I in an attempt to like try and take some of that emotional burden from him for him being in the hospital for the nth time, I shared with him my sickle cell status. And I was with the hope, I guess, that it would be helpful, but I think instead it had the backlash of him feeling like even more like cursed, I guess, and frustrated with his situation. So when I meet patients or learn of patients who have sickle cell, it's always like a 50-50 gamble for me. Do I share that I also have sickle cell and that I see you and that I hear you and like I'm going to take your pain seriously as you go in for surgery? Because I don't want you to wake up in pain. Like that's really like the number one thing I do not want for you. Or do I not say anything and just kind of hope that I'm not coming across to you as, oh, another doctor who says you're going to take care of me and it's all going to be fine, and it's not going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Lynn, I love how you shared that in terms of that, do I share or do I not share, depending on the type of patient. And that's your whole concept of that struggle that you have was part of the reason why we started the Ruby Ball, was because we wanted to be able to be that voice that helps to encourage and inspire other individuals living with sickle cell, which sounds like that's kind of what your struggle is. You want to be able to inspire, you want to be able to give them some sort of hope that everything is going to be okay, because they see like your journey and the fact that you're where you're at there to assist them, so they understand like, okay, she knows my pain, she knows my struggle. But then I see how you see with like some patients, they may feel like she's may have sickle cell, but she's not in my particular position right now, right? So it's like two different like dynamics, but in the same breath, I feel that it's very important because how we talk about sickle cell being a silent disease. And so with it being a silent disease, a lot of people don't truly understand it or feel as though others don't understand what they're dealing with or what they're going through. So I think it's very critical and important for you to continue to do the work that you're doing and continuing to share that so that they see that there's somebody that looks like them. There's somebody that's like them, that's in a position to help them. And so I really like how you shared that that information, but just continue to move forward and continue to do the things that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. And I'm sure that those individuals, even the guy that you said, like, it was like, you don't know what I'm feeling, you know, from going through a crisis in the moment, it's kind of hard because like all you can think about is your pain. But I'm sure that with him, like getting out of that situation, he appreciated that you were able to like share that information with him.
Yeah, Ijeoma, I definitely hear you. I think those are definitely good points. And Dr. Lynn, hearing you talk about or ask that question, I'm sure this is a question that you battle with every day, made me think about our conversation with Dr. Ife. So on episode 4 of our podcast, we spoke with Dr. Ife. She's a sickle cell doctor and very well known in the sickle cell space. And she's been doing this work for 25 plus years. And she was, one of the things that really hit me was her talk about what it means to be a good doctor. And for her, it was about having empathy. It was about being able to let patients know, I see you, I see where you're coming from. And so I think that you stand in your authentic space, like you have sickle cell, right? And maybe it's not the degree of sickle cell that someone else does, because I do believe that there's definitely a spectrum, right? Some people have not so bad, you know, crises, and then there are people who have them every day. But you stand in your authentic space and you say, you know, like you said, like I am where I'm literally standing in your shoes and I want you to do better and I'm going to fight for you. And I think that's all you can do. Now, whether it will be received from everyone, you know, that's up to them, but you stand in your authentic space and you continue to be, you know, to have empathy. And one of the ways that you can show your patients that, I think, is by being who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And just even speaking about that, because I know you talked about the fact that you're actually in the hospital and you're working in space with patients in critical care. Just getting to the fact that we're actually a year out from when this whole COVID stuff started becoming a very big and prevalent thing in all of our lives. Like, who knew that a year later we'd still be talking about COVID, right? Like, we literally thought like, oh, we'll be in the house, we'll be quarantining for like the next month or 2
weeks. Yeah.
And then it's like, look where we're at now. So I want you to share a little bit about your experience, not only as a doctor, but as somebody living with sickle cell, being in that space and knowing how highly contagious it is, but still needing to do your job. Like, how was that for you?
Ties back into confusion. So I was in Philadelphia when COVID first hit America. When it hit New York, it started spilling over into New Jersey, and the healthcare system that I worked with had hospitals out in New Jersey that were just overfilled, don't have enough like doctors with high level skill, training and knowledge to take care of these rapidly sick patients. So when I was in residency in Philadelphia, when this was coming out. Like, I'm an anesthesiologist. My job is to intubate. I am up in your mouth. I am the number one highest risk physician to catch COVID. Number one, no one higher than me. So a few of my superiors knew I had sickle cell. I had a crisis earlier that year that caused me to be hospitalized, and so it was something that I was still debating, like sharing with the general community of my coworkers. But at that time, only my superiors knew about it. And so when COVID came, they whisked me away, and they're like, "No, you cannot go to work." They were about to put me on FMLA, like all these things where I was worried about like losing an income when there's a fight to be had right now with this virus. So what ended up happening was that I ended up working kind of from a remote location, doing what's called EICU, or electronic ICU, where we literally are a video assistant ICU doctor who is instructing doctors from who are not in an ICU background, who don't have that training, how to take care of these patients and helping them make decisions in critical situations. And so at that time, I was in the last year of my residency. I was already going into ICU, so they saw that, like, as far as they were concerned, I was already an ICU physician, and that's how I spent the beginning of the pandemic. But then when it came time to move to St. Louis for my critical care training, at this point, there was no vaccine, and I was not about to be out of a job. So I kept my status hidden, and I just put my head down and I worked, and I had my PPE on. I did double, triple checks all the time. It was July at this point. I think a lot of us had kind of known from this point that, like, okay, the likelihood that COVID's going to be on your clothing, very, 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 very low. Likelihood COVID's going to be in your hair, very, very, very low. So some of the more extreme practices that we were doing, such as showering before entering the house and changing out scrubs, we kind of like peeled away from. Instead, just did change your scrubs and going in and out to work. But literally, like, my first major rotation as a fellow in the critical care unit was in the COVID ECMO unit.
Wow. Dr. Lynn, do you know that the title of this podcast is called Silent? I mean, you are speaking to that, the way that you felt that you needed to silence yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
but we're here to amplify voices.
Yes, which is why I felt like I had to come on here and share like my story, because it's been a journey to go from not knowing to knowing and hiding to now being like, look, I'm here. I'm going to teach my colleagues how to treat patients like me who wind up in their ICUs, because we're not treated the way we need to be treated in most ICUs around America. And then when you add COVID into the mix, there are so many sickle cell patients who will present with a crisis, normal looking crisis, but that will be their first symptom of having COVID. Like, for several sickle cell patients, their first symptom of having COVID is just they have a normal crisis. But if the mere definition of having a crisis and being COVID positive makes you acute chest, makes you the extreme, you need to be hospitalized, you need to be watched, like, we need to make sure this is not be accelerate, and you need to get intubated and all these things. So basically, like, it's been real. And when the vaccine came out, I best believe I was the first in line. Like, they in our institution kind of did what a lot of other institutions did at first, where they kind of wanted to prioritize those who were older and not exposed to patient care, instead of prioritizing those who are younger, who were put on the front lines because we're younger. This sort of story was all over in San Francisco, and also like happened in St. Louis. So but once enough of us, protested, and like, we're young, but we have chronic diseases just like everyone else. They switched it around, and so I got vaccinated. I encourage everyone with sickle cell to get vaccinated.
So what, Dr. Lynn, when, the people who did know you knew you were working with COVID patients, in this new environment, what did they like advise you of anything? What did they say?
So the people who knew I was working was really only my family, my husband, his family, and like my closest of closest friends. And they were worried sick about me. My husband, like, every day was just like, okay, is this crisis like, like, is this COVID, or is this just like your usual like pain crisis?
Yeah.
And then like there was a time where I had a real scare that I had COVID, because we are so spread thin, man. Us physicians, like, taking care of really sick patients, that a lot of times they'll have you work at a non-COVID unit for like many days and then have to cross cover and go into the COVID unit and then come back to your non-COVID patients. And you do your best to, one, you don't get sick, and two, you don't want to be carrying anything to a patient. But I definitely had a scare where I like discovered in the middle of doing a bronchoscopy on a COVID patient. So a bronchoscopy is where we take a camera, go through your breathing tube, and look at your lungs directly. It is an aerosolizing procedure, which means literally I'm spreading COVID particles ultra fast into it's worse than someone coughing on you with COVID. It's like, I'm spitting in your face with COVID. And I realized after the procedure, my mask fit was off. I had picked up the wrong size mask, because I was rushing to like help, because we needed to clear this patient up with this bronch. And so I was like, okay, I was wearing the wrong size fit. Maybe it was nothing. And then like 5 days later, I came down with a wicked fever. I like didn't stand anymore at work. I had to be sent home early, and I immediately got COVID tested. And thank goodness it was negative. I did not have COVID. But that 24 to 48 hour period waiting for our result, my husband was freaking out, family was freaking out. We were all just like, I was just like, oh my God, this is like, what have I done? Like, what have I done? What are you doing, Lynn? Take care of yourself. You don't have to do this. There are other things you could do in life. But I wanted to be a doctor for forever. I specifically wanted to be an anesthesiologist since high school, and I wanted to be a critical care physician since early medical school. So I cannot emphasize what a blessing it is that the scientific forces across the world have put together many vaccines. And I understand that there are legitimate fears and concerns out there regarding the vaccine and its safety and efficacy. But given the absolute known fatality risks with COVID, I cannot emphasize enough that if you have sickle cell, even if you don't have sickle cell, if you care about anyone near you who may have sickle cell, please get the vaccine. It will keep you safe. It will keep others safe who aren't old enough or healthy enough to get the vaccine from catching the virus, because I don't want to see you wind up in my ICU. Yeah. Because if you're in my ICU, you're already up against a wall.
Dr. Lynn, I'm so glad that you shared that, because it's so real. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to get vaccinated. We kind of touched on this during one of our last podcasts with the rest of our board members. For the fact that it's been identified that people with sickle cell are in that high risk group of possibly being affected by it severely, right? And so knowing that the possibility of dying from COVID is very high, I'd rather be in that group where I know, like, okay, I'm covered, and something that's been identified by doctors and something that's been tested to know, like, okay, this is something that can protect me. Right. So I'd rather go about getting that protection than sitting and being open and vulnerable to the illness that I already know what it can cause to others, because I've seen it. Right.
Wow. So this has been a year for you. Like, you have probably experienced all of the emotions. I was in a conversation earlier and someone was asking me about an experience in grad school, and I was like, it was a roller coaster. I went through if you think about the emotion wheel, I experienced all of the emotions. And I imagine that's how this year has gone for you. What are some of the glimmers of light that you've experienced, either in the hospital or out?
I got married. I got married. My wedding still happened. It wasn't like my wedding. I mean, it wasn't like the big, like, hold it on that I wanted it to be, but I got married. We did it over Zoom. We crashed the internet. We crashed the Zoom meeting with all the people from all over the world. You know, in some ways, it's even better that it was over Zoom because we have family. Like my husband's half Brazilian, so he's got a lot of family in Brazil. You know, I'm Nigerian, so I got all this family in Nigeria, and so like this was a great way to have like everyone from all the cultures there, and it was amazing. It was the like, okay, you know, COVID didn't take this.
Yeah.
I like how you see this. I like how you put it like that, because I know that's been a big thing for a lot of people this past year was the fact that they had to cancel things that they were supposed to have done. And they felt that COVID took a lot away from them. Right. But then there's some things that you still don't allow them to take that joy. And so I like how you were able to share that it was actually a blessing for you to be able to have it in that light, because I know as a bride, because I also do wedding planning also sometimes. So I know how it is as a bride to like have this dream big wedding in your head, and this is what you want, and like you've envisioned all of this, and then all of a sudden something that you have no control of comes and changes your plans. So I really like how you saw the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, so Ijeoma just said, I do wedding planning sometimes. I'm just going to put it out there for you and everyone who is listening to this podcast as she's trying to dim her light. Ijeoma does wedding planning, period. You can find her at Ijeoma Ezinne on Instagram. She's currently planning at least 2 weddings that I know about. Like, stop playing, girl. And the weddings that she does are magical. Like, I'm serious. We're gonna put this in the show notes so that you can go to at Ijeoma Ezinne and check out her website and her Instagram page, because she's playing.
Okay, I need to hit up this link because I've been debating if I want to have like a second wedding, like a real wedding. And
girl.
You know, I feel like by then, you know, most America will be like vaccinated. If I'm not gonna do like a second wedding, it's at least gonna be like our 1-year wedding, you know.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like
no, that's a lot. I have a client that was supposed to get married in South Africa, and they had to postpone it. And so they ended up doing something small here in DC, and they're still going to have their wedding in South Africa, like once COVID like kind of dies down and we have a better understanding of what's going on.
Or baby shower.
Yeah, so girl. Or baby shower. Oh, girl, trying. Oh, that's that's going to be the next adventure. All right, so I'm going to use you for events. Okay,
I'll share that with you, girl. So yeah, it's Ijeoma Ezinne Collective on Instagram.
Oh,
and then the website, Ijeoma Ezinne Collective on Instagram, and then the website is loveezinne.com. So
can you spell Ezinne for our listeners, please?
Ezinne.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
You know,
see, Christina, but that's how Christina is. She just wants to make sure that everybody is sharing and expressing like those things that make them, right? And those things that can inspire and help other people. So I appreciate you, girl.
Yeah, don't negate your Black girl magic.
Everybody to win.
Do not negate that Black girl magic.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see, like, what I'm seeing in you, Dr. Lynn, is an advocate for sickle cell. And I wonder if you have been an advocate outside of this current podcast space, right? Besides being in the rooms with your patients, how have you let your voice be heard, or how do you want it to be heard in the future? Like, how do you want to be an advocate?
So I want to be an advocate within the medical stratosphere, because it really starts with our healthcare, our physicians, really increasing their understanding and their exposure to sickle cell patients. Like, man, I grew up at a time, I grew up at a time as if it was that long ago, but that, like, I remember very distinctly in college, I was the first Black person who was intelligent that someone had ever met, and they said that to my face. Knowing that there are some people who start with that as their start, and that they get to this person got to medical school, is that this person's a physician. Knowing that there are people like that who might be taking care of patients like you and me, of people like you and me with sickle cell anemia, I'm like, okay, no. We gotta fix the script. So my advocacy starts within my own organization, within my own small medical community, and I'm trying to expand it to to the national community. So right now I'm a fellow in critical care medicine. I'll be done with my training by 2022, and then I'll go on to be an attending and be in charge of my own unit and my own team and taking care of patients, right? As part of my time here as a fellow, I am an academic at baseline. I love to teach. I love to learn. And my teaching focus has been teaching younger doctors and my co-doctors and even my superiors how to take care of sickle cell patients in the ICU. It's something that you may not see often, but when you see it, you need to know how to treat it, because these patients can die really, really fast, and they die young. And nobody wants to lose any patient, but especially a young patient. There's something about losing younger patients. It hurts much harder, especially when it's something that could have been prevented. So I do a lecture series with my co-fellows on sickle cell, and especially how sickle cell now coincides with COVID. And so I started there. And then recently I'm kind of trying to reach out beyond my own little stratosphere nationally, because a lot of my interest is in diversity and equity, and that's gender diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, gender identity diversity. And so with that, basically I stand proudly in my disease. I stand proudly as who I am as a Black woman. And there's not a lot of us, especially in the ICU. Like when you're in the ICU, this is the end of the line. This is like, if we can't fix you, then all we can do is best prepare you for moving on to Jesus. And within my specialty, of those who are critical care doctors with an anesthesia background, do you know how many are Black in the entire United States of America? I learned this fun fact yesterday. Take a guess. Choose a number.
Dang. I'll say 50.
That would have been my number 2.
50? There's 17. There are 17 Black critical care anesthesia trained doctors. And of all the critical care doctors, the number one feeders into that field. Like, you can be an anesthesiologist and then specialize in critical care. You can be an internal medicine doctor and then specialize in critical care. You can be an emergency medicine doctor and specialize in critical care. I would say that like most critical care doctors have an internal medicine background, and then the second highest would probably be anesthesia, and then the third highest would then be emergency medicine. It's still crazy that there's only 17 of us, not even enough for one for every state. And I learned this information from an African-American doctor, Dr. McDade. He is works very highly in diversity and equity and inclusion for the ACGME, which is the organization responsible for training our doctors. Like, this is the organization that makes sure that each program is accredited, that they are doing the best to make stellar physicians. And so his training is in his sickle cell research. He's a sickle cell research doctor. And so when he came and talked to us and shared this knowledge with us, because it was part of our diversity and equity inclusion talks, I was like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of work to be done, but also like not all that work is going to be done in your small sphere. You got to stretch nationally. You got to stretch internationally. Because it's you have to have your home, what you do at home, but also what you do abroad, what you do nationally. And so that was also like a real motivator for me, like stepping up. Let me reach out to y'all. I need to like share my voice. I love what you guys are doing here. I'm going to hashtag share this everywhere because this is I just cannot explain like how at an opportune time I feel that your work has been. I mean, I'm also like really mad at myself that like I missed the Ruby Ball when we were still able to have events, because I saw y'all glam out, and I'm like, oh, there was a ball for my disease. I could avoid all this. Anyway, but like I am always connected to like the SCDAA, like and whatever I can do to help promote y'all's voices, because promoting y'all's voices promotes our voices, promotes the physicians who are working hand in hand with patients, or those who are patients themselves, to get better care, get better understanding, and help our colleagues who may be blind, deaf to the experiences of patients like us, to people like us. So that's what it means to be an advocate to me. Being seen, being heard, being loud, being proud.
I love it. And I love how you amplify your voice, and just through sharing your story to be able to, again, like we say, motivate and inspire, right? Not just those living with sickle cell that are dealing with it, but those around us, so that they have an understanding of what they can do as well in order to be an advocate or to help somebody that's dealing with this issue. So I genuinely, like, I see you and I appreciate you. And it just goes back to like how Christina was saying with our talk with Dr. Ife, being able to have more people out there that are in the medical community that understand and that see and that can be a patient advocate, because it goes back to some of the statistics that were shared with CNN when they talk about like how Black mothers die giving childbirth because they don't have doctors that understand that or that know how to treat them, right? And so if you have a doctor that looks like you, that is like you, that truly understands what you're dealing with, that kind of helps as well. Because us, again, as Black people, it's kind of hard in terms of like when it comes to pain, like in sickle cell is a disease that is shown through pain, right? And so a lot of us, we don't necessarily want people to see us in pain, or don't want people to know that we're in pain. And so because you may not like exhibit on your face that you're hurting or that you're in pain, then the doctor may feel is like, okay, they don't necessarily need that pain medicine, right? Or that they'll be okay because they're saying that they're a 5 when in actuality that their pain may be a 10. And so being able to truly understand and see that patient and understand what they're dealing with and what they're going through, so that you can give them a better plan in order to get better, I feel like that's something that needs to be done. But for real, Dr. Lynn, we appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. I'm still excited and happy that we were able to connect via Instagram, but just how you share like your growth and how you found out about having sickle cell while you were in medical school, even though you were going through some of the issues or whatever growing up. And so how you talked through that confusion, right? And how it was a confusing journey, but you changed that confusion into clarity. And that clarity became your story. And it's a way for you to be able to continue to help and advocate for those individuals that are living with sickle cell, and then help those individuals outside of the community to truly understand. So we appreciate that, right? And so we're excited about the clarity that has been brought to you and just the great work that you're doing.
Yes. So tell our listeners where they can find you on Instagram or other social networks.
So y'all can follow me on Twitter, the Med Twitter Stratosphere. My handle is Pauls_MD. That's spelled PAULS_MD. Pauls is my what's it called? Maiden. There we go. Sorry, I'm tired. Maiden name. You can also find me on Instagram at Niolynn, NIOLYNN. And my email for those who may have more questions about sickle cell, COVID-19, or just anything related to medicine, whether you're trying to come up in your medical career, whether you kind of just need advice about ICU life or anything like that, you can reach out to me at paulslynn@gmail.com.
We appreciate you. Thank you. And so just even closing out with that clarity and just going back again to this past year, working in the ICU and just the things that you've experienced and the things that you've seen, where do you see us going from here? Right? Like, where do you see things going now that a vaccine has been identified, now that people are starting to get vaccinated? What do you see for the future?
I mean, quite honestly, I'm very hopeful. I'm already seeing the numbers come down in the number of people we have in our hospital who are positive for COVID, whether or not they need high-level ICU care or can be managed on the floor. I'm encouraged by seeing the number of vaccines go up. I'm encouraged by our country putting in the dollars down to get those vaccines, and what I'm also really encouraged by is the like acute things we have done to address access to healthcare. Like the organizations that people have done to make sure that minorities, especially Black Americans, get their vaccine if they want one. that we're not going to make the issue of distance or convenience an issue anymore. If you want a vaccine, if that's the choice that you have made, we're going to make this the easiest choice for you to follow through on. And it's been from a public health perspective, it's been amazing. It's been enlightening. It's like a lot of issues that when people say like, oh no, it's not practical to do. Revert back to COVID. We've shown that you can do the impossible. If enough people will it will happen.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Dr. Lynn, for sharing your story and for everything that you do. And we look forward to staying connected with you.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Bye.